The night had always been my companion, but that evening it seemed to breathe against my skin like a secret waiting to be revealed. Rain traced the glass of my apartment window, each droplet a restless heartbeat echoing my own. I sat curled on a couch that sagged in all the wrong places, the soft scent of baby powder clinging to the fabric, as if even the air knew the weight of my love for my daughter. My hands trembled as I typed, words spilling from desperation more than reason. I needed help, needed the father of my child to remember his responsibility, to remember that Emma and I were still here, fragile, waiting, and too close to losing everything. The screen glowed against the shadows, my only light, as I whispered my plea into digital silence. Please, just one more extension. Please, don't forget us. I hit send, clinging to the hope that the man who had abandoned me might, in some flicker of conscience, answer. My breath caught, and then I pushed further, reckless in my exhaustion. I mentioned the name he had once spoken in anger, a name I thought might make him move. The Castelli job. I thought it would scare him into remembering his daughter's medicine, her fever, her small chest rising unevenly in the night. I thought it was a bluff that would never matter. But fate listens when you least expect it. My phone buzzed in my hand, sharp and sudden. My heart leapt, then collapsed when I saw the reply. Not his voice, not his excuses, but something colder, heavier. Who is this? 3 words, and yet they sliced through me with an edge I could not soften. I froze, every instinct screaming that I had just stumbled into something I did not understand. I apologized quickly, hoping to bury the mistake before it grew teeth. Sorry, wrong person. Please ignore. But silence was not mercy that night. The reply came swiftly. What Castelli job? The name I had spoken like a shadow had now reached the very ears it belonged to. I had not texted my ex. I had texted someone else. Someone dangerous. My hands shook, hovering above the screen, but no answer could erase what I had already written. Another message came, demanding my name. Then another, asking for my address. I put the phone down as though it had burned me, my chest tightening. Fear coiled itself around me, squeezing tighter with each unanswered vibration of the device. I checked on Emma, her small body curled against the glow of her unicorn nightlight. Her fever had broken, a small mercy in a night turning merciless. I brushed her hair back and kissed her warm forehead, clinging to her innocence like a lifeline. In that fragile silence, the phone buzzed again and again. Against my will, my eyes moved to the screen. My name stared back at me. My address. Even Emma's illness, details I had not spoken, now written by a stranger who knew too much. My body went cold. The walls around me felt thin, paper against a storm. I drew the blinds with shaking hands and peered down at the street. The rain had polished the pavement into mirrors, and in one of those reflections I saw it. A black SUV pulled up to the curb, its headlights extinguished, yet its presence undeniable. Another followed. Then another. Within minutes, my world was surrounded. 5 black cars, engines rumbling low, breath of beasts waiting to devour. I stumbled back from the window, pulse loud in my ears. I thought of the police, of dialing for safety, but how could I explain that my own mistake had summoned something darker than law could protect me from? The stairwell creaked with footsteps, unhurried yet certain, drawing closer to the fragile door that separated my life from whatever waited beyond. My daughter slept in the next room, trusting the world to be kind. And I, her only shield, stood trembling before a knock I knew would come. The phone lit again. One sentence that turned my blood into ice. "Open the door, Sophia." I clutched the device to my chest, staring at the lock that had never looked so fragile. The knock finally came, measured, patient, far more terrifying than violence could have been. My instincts screamed to run, to hide, to shield Emma with my body if I had to. Yet something deeper, something primal, whispered that escape was already gone. Survival meant opening the door. And so I did. The hallway light framed him like a portrait, his silhouette both elegant and dangerous. Broad shoulders filled the doorway, his suit cut with precision that spoke of wealth, of power, of a man who belonged to shadows others dared not name. His scent lingered before his words did, cedar, leather, and something metallic, like the echo of storms. His eyes, when the dim light touched them, were oceans of blue so sharp they felt like blades sliding across my skin. "Sophia Ellis," he said. Not a question. A fact. My knees trembled, my body weak with the weight of 1,000 unshed fears. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. "I believe we need to discuss your relationship with Michael Donovan." In that moment, the truth revealed itself. The wrong number had not reached a stranger. It had reached the very man my ex had once whispered about. A man whose name carried empires of silence and dread. Alessio Castelli. And he was standing in my doorway, surrounded by cars that owned the night. The world as I knew it had ended with the buzz of a message. And yet, as his gaze lingered on me, steady and unreadable, something unexpected flickered in the storm of my fear. Not safety, not hope, but the promise of change. Change that would carry me far from the life I had known. Change that might destroy me, or perhaps save me in ways I had never dared to imagine. And with that first step into the unknown, the story that would bind me to him, danger, desire, and a love born in the ashes of fear, had already begun. If this story has touched something inside you, if you feel the pull of its storm and warmth, I invite you to walk with me further. Leave your thoughts in a comment. Let me know if your heart trembled as mine did in that moment. A simple like or a small gesture of support helps me continue weaving stories like this, healing for tired souls searching for refuge. And if you wish to follow every chapter of this journey, subscribe and let us keep exploring together. Because sometimes the wrong number leads to the right destiny. And this was only the beginning. The sound of the rain lingered like a whisper outside, but inside my small apartment the air had turned dense, heavy with the presence of the man who now filled the doorway. His hand rested against the doorframe, not forcing his way in, merely steady, as though even the walls deferred to his will. I could see the faint glow of headlights from the cars behind him, their shadows slicing through the curtains like silent guards. Everything about him was calm, measured, terrifying in its certainty. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words were iron wrapped in velvet, each syllable deliberate. "Michael Donovan has something that belongs to me. And since you mentioned my name, Sophia, that means you're already part of it." I wanted to deny it, to claim ignorance, but the words clung to my throat like thorns. I could only whisper, "I don't know anything about him anymore. He left us months ago." My voice shook, and I hated that he could hear it. His gaze remained steady, blue and sharp, like fractured ice, but there was something else flickering behind it. Not softness, not pity, but the kind of awareness that sees every weakness, every hidden crack. He stepped closer, enough for the warmth of his presence to reach me. The faint smell of rain on his suit mingled with leather and cedar, an anchor pulling me deeper into his gravity. Behind him, another man lingered, larger, broader, his eyes scanning the hallway with restless vigilance. The contrast was stark. Alessio, all refined control, and the other raw force, the storm held back by chains. My breath trembled as I thought of Emma in the next room, sleeping peacefully beneath her unicorn nightlight. I wanted to scream at him to leave, to shield my daughter with nothing but my body, but he spoke again, and his voice drew me still. "I know you want nothing to do with this," he said, softer now, "but Michael made sure you would be involved the moment he tied your name to mine. He thought he was clever, but clever men don't survive long when they steal from me." He didn't need to tell me what my ex had done. The truth was written in the way Alessio's jaw tightened, in the low edge to his tone. I understood then that this wasn't about money. It was about something heavier, something dangerous enough to summon 5 cars to my street and a man like this to my door. The thunder of footsteps echoed faintly in the stairwell again, but stopped just outside. The silence pressed harder against my chest. Then came another knock, softer, controlled, the sound of inevitability. I couldn't run. There was nowhere to go. And so I did the only thing I could. I stepped aside. The air shifted as he crossed the threshold, his presence consuming the tiny living room. He moved with a grace that belied his size, each step silent but commanding. The space seemed to shrink around him, walls bending inward to contain the force of his existence. His gaze swept the room, the worn couch, the unfolded laundry, the tiny basket of Emma's toys scattered like bright fragments of innocence. Something unreadable flickered in his expression, but it was gone too quickly to name. "I don't want trouble," I whispered, my hands tightening into fists at my sides. "I only want my daughter safe." His eyes softened, not in kindness but in acknowledgement. "Then we want the same thing." It should have comforted me, but the words landed heavy. Safety in his mouth did not sound like safety in mine. The man at the door, Anton, I would later learn, remained outside, his posture rigid, his watchful gaze fixed on shadows beyond the hall. Alessio lowered his voice, almost intimate in the quiet. "Your ex has placed both of you in more danger than you realize, and unless you cooperate, others will come. They will not knock. They will not speak softly. They will take what they want." His meaning was clear. The world outside my fragile door was not one I could withstand alone. I swallowed hard, fighting the tears that threatened to break. I thought of Emma's small body curled against her stuffed rabbit, her cheeks still warm from fever. The truth struck with brutal clarity. I couldn't protect her anymore. Not from this. "I don't know where he is," I said, my voice cracking. "He barely visits. He doesn't care. I don't even have a number that works half the time." Alessio studied me, his silence unnerving. Then, with slow precision, he unbuttoned his jacket, revealing a glimpse of the steel reality he carried beneath: control, weaponry, power. "That may be true," he said, but you are still his weakness." The words landed like a stone. For the first time, I saw not just menace in him, but calculation. He wasn't here to destroy me. He was here to use me. And yet, even in that realization, something within me shifted. Because if he truly meant harm, it would already have come. Instead, he stood in my living room, offering something darker but steadier than mercy: protection in exchange for trust. I sat down on the couch because my knees could no longer hold me. The cushions sighed beneath me, carrying the weight of my decision. He remained standing, a sentinel against the storm he had brought to my door. Outside, the cars waited. Inside, time slowed, stretched, bent around the fragile thread of understanding forming between us. Emma's soft cry drifted from the bedroom, a small sound of discomfort in her sleep. My body moved instinctively, rising to go to her, but his voice caught me mid-step. "Go," he said, his tone unexpectedly gentle. "She needs you." I hesitated, startled by the shift. He had spoken her existence before with the precision of a knife. Now it was with something closer to care. I hurried to her room, brushing damp curls from her forehead, whispering words of comfort, words of healing meant to anchor her in dreams untouched by the darkness of this night. When I returned, he was still there, waiting, as though the world outside could not move without his permission. His gaze held mine, unwavering, and in that silence I knew that my life had already begun to change. This was not a chance encounter. This was a crossing of fates, tangled threads pulling me toward a man whose world was carved from shadow. And yet, as the night pressed closer, I felt not only fear, but something dangerous, something alive. It was the beginning of surrender, not of safety, but of inevitability. And though I did not yet know it, the next step would take me far from this apartment, far from the fragile walls that had sheltered us, into his world, where danger wore the face of desire, and where love, if it ever came, would not be gentle. The rain eased outside, but inside, the storm had only just begun. The apartment no longer felt like mine. It felt like a cage with paper walls, trembling under the weight of the storm that had stepped across its threshold. I gathered Emma from her bed, her small body limp with half-sleep, her arms looping instinctively around my neck. Her fever had eased, her breath warm against my skin, but the fragility of her presence filled me with a new, sharper fear. I wrapped her in a sweater, clutching her tighter as I turned back toward the man who had quietly claimed dominion over the night. His eyes lingered on the way I held her, protective and desperate, and for a heartbeat his gaze softened, though it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He adjusted the cuff of his jacket, a gesture casual and deliberate, before speaking. "We leave now." The words were final. No room for argument, no room for breath. I only nodded because deep down I already understood staying was no longer safety, if it had ever been. Staying meant being found by others who would not hesitate to shatter everything. Anton opened the door, his massive frame filling the hallway, and the cold night air rushed in. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, silver beads clinging to the asphalt and glinting in the glow of street lamps. The SUVs waited in formation, engines humming low, their tinted windows like unreadable eyes. I pulled Emma closer, whispering soft, healing words against her hair, promising her an adventure, though my own heart trembled. Alessio's hand hovered near the small of my back, not touching, not claiming, but guiding. Even without contact, the weight of his presence steered me forward. The stairwell echoed with our steps, his measured, Anton's heavy, mine too quick, betraying nerves I could not hide. Emma stirred, blinking against the dim light, her voice drowsy. "Mummy, where are we going?" I kissed her temple. "Somewhere safe, baby. Somewhere warm." The front door opened to the night, and the wall of black cars gleamed like guardians of a secret war. One door opened, a driver waiting with the formality of someone accustomed to obedience. I hesitated, but Alessio spoke with a calm certainty that slid beneath my defenses. "Trust me." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Against reason, against fear, I stepped inside. The leather seat embraced us, the air carrying the faint aroma of expensive cologne, of something foreign to my world. Emma curled on my lap, clutching her rabbit, already drifting back to sleep. Alessio slid in beside us, the space shrinking, charged with something I could not name. The door closed with a solid finality, shutting out the city I had known. At his signal, the convoy moved as one, engines blending into a low symphony. Through the tinted glass, the streets blurred into streaks of light, the rain-slicked city slipping away. I stared at the blur, my thoughts unraveling. "This feels like kidnapping," I whispered. His profile was calm, chiseled in the passing glow of streetlights. "If it were, you wouldn't have had time to pack." His eyes flicked toward Emma, softened by the weight of sleep. "This is protection." The truth in his tone silenced me, though unease lingered. The city thinned, streets widening into avenues lined with ancient trees. Lights grew fewer, houses larger, shadows deeper. Finally, the convoy turned through iron gates that opened soundlessly, as though the very air obeyed him. The driveway curved through manicured grounds until a mansion emerged, its glass and stone gleaming against the night. It was a fortress dressed as a home, intimidating and breathtaking all at once. My chest tightened as the SUV stopped in the circular drive. "Welcome to my home," Alessio said quietly, watching my reaction. "For now, it is yours too." The words tangled in my chest. Safety and captivity had never looked so similar. The driver opened the door, and the cool night wrapped around us. I carried Emma, her head heavy on my shoulder, her curls brushing my cheek. A woman appeared in the doorway of the mansion, silver hair pulled back with precision, her posture straight, her eyes sharp. "Rosa," Alessio greeted her with a familiarity that carried weight. "This is Sophia and her daughter. They'll stay in the East Suite." Rosa's gaze swept over me and then softened as it fell on Emma. Without a word, she stepped forward, her presence both commanding and maternal. "The child is ill?" she asked. "Recovering," I answered, holding Emma tighter. "Then she needs rest," Rosa said simply, already turning toward the grand staircase. Alessio nodded, and with that, the decision was made. Inside, the mansion was everything my life had not been. Soaring ceilings, marble floors, walls adorned with art worth more than I could imagine. Yet beneath the grandeur was something unexpected, an understated elegance, a quiet warmth that unsettled me. It was not excess. It was control. We ascended the stairs, the sound of our steps muffled by thick carpets. Rosa led us to a suite larger than my entire apartment. A sitting room with velvet drapes, a bedroom with a king-sized bed draped in ivory linens, a second smaller room that could only have been prepared for Emma. "Tonight, she stays with you," Rosa said. She pressed a cool cloth into my hand. "For her fever. Pajamas are in the dresser. They may not fit perfectly, but they will serve until tomorrow." Her tone was practical, almost kind, and something inside me loosened. I laid Emma on the bed, her small body curling instinctively around her rabbit. She sighed in her sleep, safe for the moment. I turned back to find Alessio watching, his eyes unreadable. He stood in the doorway, his presence filling the room, his gaze lingering on the sight of a mother tucking her child into unfamiliar sheets. Something flickered there, respect, perhaps, or something deeper he would never name. "You're safe here," he said. The words were firm, yet carried a warmth that brushed against my fear like balm against a wound. Safe. The word echoed, both promise and warning. I wanted to believe it, needed to for Emma's sake. I smoothed her hair, pressing a kiss to her forehead, letting healing words flow in silence. "You are safe. You are loved. You are protected." When I finally lifted my gaze, Alessio was still watching, silent but present, as though he, too, had felt the prayer in the air. The night stretched on, and exhaustion pulled me down. The sheets were softer than anything I had known, but sleep came only in fragments, filled with dreams of shadows and blue eyes, of black cars and a voice that said, "Trust me." Each time I woke, I checked Emma's breath, her warmth, her safety, and each time I found her still there, peaceful against the storm. Morning arrived with pale light spilling through gauzy curtains, painting the room in soft gold. Emma stirred, her fever gone, her eyes bright with wonder as she explored the suite. "Is this a hotel, Mummy?" she asked, peering into the marble bathroom with its vast tub. "Something like that," I said, watching her smile return, fragile but healing. A knock came at the door. Rosa entered with a tray of fruit and warm bread, the scent filling the air. "For the little one," she said, her tone brisk but gentle. Emma's eyes lit up at the sight, her laughter soft and sweet, a melody that carried through the suite like sunlight. I watched her eat, watched her cheeks flush with new strength, and for a moment my heart eased. The night had changed everything, but here, in the golden hush of morning, surrounded by the warmth of a home that wasn't mine, I felt something I hadn't in so long: hope. And when Alessio appeared at the doorway once more, his presence quiet but commanding, I knew the story was far from over. It had only just begun to unfold. The morning air carried a stillness that pressed gently against my skin, as though the mansion itself knew how fragile my balance was between fear and hope. Emma's laughter drifted across the suite, her small voice filled with delight at the discovery of velvet curtains and a marble bathtub big enough to swallow her whole imagination. I let her joy wrap around me like a healing balm, soothing the restless ache that had followed me through the night. For the first time in days, her cheeks carried color, and the weight of fever had lifted from her eyes. Watching her, I almost allowed myself to forget the storm that had brought us here. Almost. A knock broke the fragile calm. Rosa entered with her measured grace, her silver hair gleaming in the morning light. Behind her came a man with kind eyes hidden behind thin glasses, a medical bag in his hand. "Dr. Maroff," she announced. "Mr. Castelli's physician. He is here for the child." I stiffened, instinct screaming not to let strangers near Emma, but the doctor's smile carried a warmth that softened me, and Emma, ever open-hearted, greeted him with shy curiosity. He listened to her chest, checked her throat, spoke to her gently as though she were his only patient in the world. Within minutes, he assured me her fever was gone, leaving only a minor infection easily treated. Relief swept through me so suddenly that I nearly wept. Rosa lingered after the doctor left, her sharp eyes watching me as I smoothed Emma's hair. "Mr. Castelli wishes to speak with you," she said at last. "He is waiting in his study." My chest tightened. I looked at Emma, who was happily nibbling a piece of bread from the breakfast tray. "I can't leave her." "You will not," Rosa said, her tone firm yet reassuring. "I will stay. Nothing will happen to her under this roof." There was no space for refusal. My feet carried me down the hall, guided by Rosa's directions, until I reached a heavy door of dark wood. I knocked once, then stepped inside. The study was a world apart, shelves stretching to the ceiling, filled with leather-bound books, the faint scent of tobacco clinging to polished wood, and behind a massive desk, Alessio, dressed not in a suit, but in a dark sweater and jeans, a quiet elegance that disarmed me more than his formality had. He looked up from a folder, his eyes locking on mine with a focus that stilled the room. "Please, sit," he said, gesturing to a leather chair. I remained standing. "I told Rosa 15 minutes, I said, my arms crossed. "Whatever you have to say it now." Something flickered in his eyes, not anger, but a shadow of respect. He rose from behind the desk, holding several photographs. He placed them on the polished surface between us. My breath faltered as I stepped closer. Emma. In the park. At preschool. In the courtyard of our building. Me beside her in some, her alone in others. Each photograph a theft of privacy, each one a violation. My knees weakened. "What is this?" "Michael's apartment," Alessio said, his tone flat but edged with restrained anger. "He had these pinned to his wall." I shook my head, refusing to believe. But he placed another set of photographs before me. Men I did not recognize, captured in secret moments. Viktor Petrov, Nikolai Banov, he named them calmly. Leaders of the Russian syndicate. Michael has been tracking them, and he has been tracking you. "No," I whispered, but the denial rang hollow. My hands shook as I picked up the final object he laid on the desk, a small pink backpack. Emma's. Inside. Her passport, clothes, her favorite book, an envelope of cash. My throat closed. He was planning to take her. Alessio's voice softened, either to flee or to use her as leverage. Perhaps both. Tears stung my eyes. All the months I had begged him to show up, to be a father, and all along he had been watching us from the shadows, planning to steal the very thing I had fought to protect. My body ached with betrayal, with the cruel truth that the man I once trusted with my heart had aimed to use our daughter as a shield. "How do I know you didn't plant this?" I demanded, my voice breaking. He met my gaze steadily. "If I wanted to force your cooperation, I could have done so the moment I entered your apartment. I have no need for games." His words struck true, and with them came the bitter collapse of my defenses. The truth was too sharp to deny. Mike had betrayed us. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice a whisper of exhaustion. "Now," he said, returning to his seat, "you help me bring him out. You contact him. Tell him you know what he has planned. Use the passport, the photos, whatever will force his hand. He will come for you, for the child, and when he does, I will be there." I hesitated. Fear warred with fury, but above them both rose the steady flame of a mother's will. I thought of Emma's laughter that morning, of her wide-eyed wonder at the marble tub, of her fragile trust in me to keep her safe. "I want guarantees," I said suddenly, surprising myself with the steel in my tone. "When this is over, you let us go. New names, new lives, money to start again. Somewhere he can't find us. Somewhere none of this can touch us." For the first time, a hint of surprise crossed his face. Then, slowly, a smile touched his lips. Not cruel, not mocking, but genuine, as though he had been waiting for me to find my voice. "You're negotiating with me," he said. "I'm protecting my daughter," I answered, throwing Rosa's words back at him. His smile deepened, rare and fleeting, then vanished into something more serious. He reached for a piece of paper, wrote in elegant script, and signed his name with a flourish. He slid it across the desk. A promise, not legally binding, but binding in a way I suspected mattered more to him. His word. I tucked the paper into my pocket, the weight of it heavier than steel. "Then give me a phone." He handed me his sleek, untraceable. My fingers brushed his as I took it, and a spark shot through me, unwelcome, yet undeniable. Not fear, something warmer, more dangerous. I dialed Mike's number from memory. He answered, his voice taut. "Who is this?" "It's me," I said, steadying my voice as Alessio watched in silence. "We need to talk. Now." The conversation unfolded like a dance of knives, each word chosen with care. I told him about the passport, the backpack. I accused him of planning to take Emma. His denial faltered, then cracked, his voice dripping with excuses I no longer believed. With each syllable, I saw him for what he truly was. Not a man desperate to protect, but a man willing to sacrifice his own child for survival. When I ended the call, my body shook, but not from fear, from clarity. I set the phone down, raising my eyes to Alessio. His expression was unreadable, but there was something new there, something that unsettled me more than his power. Admiration. Respect. "You understand now?" he said quietly. "Yes," I whispered. My heart ached, but my voice did not waver. "And I will not let him take her from me." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of promises unspoken, of a fragile thread of trust forming between us. I had stepped into his world unwillingly, dragged by a mistake. But now, in this gilded room, surrounded by shadows of betrayal, I realized I was choosing to stay. Not for him. Not yet, but for Emma, and somewhere deep inside, beneath the ache and the fear, something else stirred, a dangerous warmth that would not be silenced. The day stretched ahead, heavy with decisions, but for the first time in years I felt less alone. The storm had not passed, but I had found someone who would stand in its eye with me. And as I returned to Emma's side, watching her sleep in the comfort of a room that was not ours, I whispered healing words into the silence. We are safe. We are stronger than yesterday. We will rise from this. Yet, in my heart, I knew this was only the beginning of the battle, and the next step would take us even deeper into Alessio's world. The hours between afternoon and night stretched long and heavy, like a silence before a storm. Emma napped, curled against her rabbit, her soft breathing steady, and I sat by her bed, smoothing her hair, whispering words of calm that were as much for me as for her. The promise I had made, never to let her be taken, echoed louder than my heartbeat. I thought of the paper folded in my pocket, signed with a name that carried both fear and strange comfort. Alessio Castelli. His word had become the shield I leaned on, though I barely knew him. When Rosa appeared to summon me, the light outside had turned to molten gold, slipping through tall windows like liquid fire. I followed her through hallways that seemed to go on forever, until we reached the study again. He was waiting there, standing by the window, his silhouette framed by the last rays of dusk. He had changed back into a suit, the sharp lines of it shaping him into something both untouchable and magnetic. He turned as I entered, and for a moment his gaze held mine in silence. Then he spoke, his tone low but certain. It's time. I stepped closer, my throat tight. Mike agreed to meet me, but he won't come alone. He never does, Alessio replied, almost with a trace of disdain. He moved around the desk, his movements smooth, deliberate. My men are already in position. The cafe will be surrounded. You don't need to risk yourself. I don't want to see him, I said, surprising myself with the finality in my voice. I've already seen enough. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of approval. Then you will stay here, safer for you and for her. Relief swept through me, though it was tangled with guilt. I thought of the man I had once loved, now preparing to walk into a trap. For Emma's sake, I told myself, for the child he had betrayed. That was all that mattered. Night fell, swift and certain. From the balcony outside the suite, I watched the convoy leave. Black cars gliding down the long drive, their engines a low growl that stirred the night air. Emma was already asleep again, exhaustion still clinging to her, and I lingered by the window, staring at the stars. I whispered soft prayers into the dark, for safety, for healing, for a future where shadows no longer threatened us. Time slowed, each minute stretched sharp as glass. I tried reading, tried closing my eyes, but nothing silenced the storm inside me. Hours passed before a knock came at the door. My heart leapt painfully as I opened it. Alessio stood there, his suit jacket gone, his shirt stained at the sleeve with something darker than rain. His expression was unreadable, his blue eyes colder than I had ever seen. "It's done," he said simply. My breath caught. "Mike?" "Alive," he answered after a pause. "For now." "He has agreed to cooperate." I sagged against the doorframe, relief and grief warring inside me. He was Emma's father, no matter what he had done. The thought of his death had haunted me, but so had the thought of his betrayal. Both truths burned. "The flash drive?" I asked. "Recovered," Alessio replied. His tone was calm, yet underneath it lay the weight of violence, of battles fought in silence. All copies destroyed. You and your daughter are safe from his mistakes now. Safe. The word drifted through me like a fragile leaf, too light to anchor, too heavy to ignore. He stepped inside, loosening his tie, his presence filling the room as though the walls expanded to contain him. For the first time, I saw weariness in his movements, the faintest crack in the armor of control. He looked at me, and in that gaze I felt something more than power. I felt humanity. "What happens now?" I whispered. "Now," he said, his voice softer, "I honor our agreement. New identities are being prepared. By tomorrow night, Sophia Ellis and her daughter will no longer exist." The words should have comforted me. Instead, they hollowed me. Disappearing meant safety. But it also meant leaving this house, this strange sanctuary, and the man who had stood between us and a world of shadows. He must have seen something in my face, because his tone changed, hesitant but deliberate. "Unless you choose otherwise?" I looked at him, startled. "What do you mean?" "Stay," he said simply. The word filled the room, heavy with meaning. Not as a guest, not as a prisoner, as something else. My breath stilled. "Why?" He took a step closer, not touching me, but near enough that the heat of his presence wrapped around me like a cloak. "Because in one night you've shown more courage, more loyalty than men I've trusted for years. Because you protect what is yours, and so do I. And because—" His voice faltered, the first crack in his certainty. "Because I find myself reluctant to let you go." His words should have frightened me. Instead, warmth spread through me, dangerous and undeniable. A longing I had buried beneath years of neglect stirred, fragile as the dawn. I turned away, toward the bed where Emma slept, her curls spread like a halo against the pillow. "I can't decide tonight. Too much has happened." "Of course," he said, his voice gentling. He stepped back, granting me space. "The offer remains." Silence stretched between us, not empty but full of something unnamed. When he finally left, I lay beside Emma, listening to her soft breathing. My heart beat fast, not with fear this time, but with something I could not yet name. I whispered into the dark, words meant only for her, words of healing. "We are safe, my love. Tomorrow will bring a new beginning. Whatever happens, I will choose for you, for us." But as I closed my eyes, the memory of blue eyes lingered, carrying with it a question I could not silence. And the next dawn would demand an answer. The morning light came soft through gauzy curtains, painting the walls in hues of pale gold and rose. Emma stirred beside me, her little body wrapped in the safety of blankets too fine for our old lives, her curls spilling over the pillow like threads of sunlight. She smiled in her sleep, clutching her rabbit close, and for the first time in weeks her face was free of fever's shadow. I lay there watching her, listening to the rhythm of her breath, letting its steadiness become my anchor. Healing came not only from medicine, but from moments like this, quiet, tender, unbroken. When I finally rose, I found fresh clothes folded neatly at the end of the bed. Rosa's touch was everywhere, orderly, practical, yet unexpectedly thoughtful. I dressed quickly, smoothing my hair, then stood for a long moment at the tall window. Below, the gardens stretched in manicured symmetry, fountains catching the early light, koi swirling like flickers of flame in their pools. It was a world untouched by the chaos that had dragged me here, and yet the chaos lingered within me. I left Emma sleeping and stepped into the corridor, the silence of the mansion pressing around me. I wandered until I found the garden doors open, a breeze carrying in the scent of roses and cut grass. There, among the pathways of stone, stood Alessio. He wore no jacket this morning, only a white shirt rolled at the sleeves, his posture relaxed yet commanding. He was feeding koi with a slow hand, his gaze intent on the fish, as if their movements whispered secrets. When he noticed me, his eyes shifted, the intensity of blue startling even under the soft sun. "You're awake," he said, his voice lower than the morning air. "Yes," I replied, stepping onto the path. "Emma is still asleep. She laughed in her dreams." His expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "Children heal quickly when given peace. They know how to let go of what we cling to." The words sank into me, soothing and sharp all at once. I joined him at the fountain, the water glistening, the koi swarming toward the food like petals in motion. For a while we stood in silence. The world narrowed to the gentle splash of water and the warmth of sun. "You're thinking of leaving," he said finally. Not a question, but a quiet truth. My hands tightened at my sides. "I don't know what to think. You promised us new lives, safety, a way out. And yet—" I looked at him, the sunlight carving his profile into something both strong and human. Part of me wonders if leaving means stepping back into a life where safety is only an illusion. His gaze did not waver. "And staying?" "Staying means—" My breath caught. The word trembled on my lips, dangerous to speak. "It means surrendering to a world I don't understand, a world where danger follows shadows, and love, if it even exists here, feels like fire. Too close, too consuming." He turned then, his eyes capturing mine, steady and unflinching. "Fire destroys, yes, but it also warms. It protects. It brings light when there is only dark." The truth of it slipped through my defenses. And for years I had lived in shadows cast by neglect, by betrayal. And now here stood a man whose very presence was both storm and shelter. I should have been afraid. Instead, I felt alive. We walked deeper into the gardens, Emma's laughter suddenly ringing from the terrace where Rosa had brought her, wrapped in a sweater, holding a basket of crumbs for the birds. She ran toward me, her cheeks flushed, her eyes alight with joy. I knelt and gathered her into my arms, her warmth filling every hollow space inside me. She pressed her face to mine and whispered, "Mommy, I like it here. It feels safe." I kissed her hair, my throat tight. Out of the mouths of children came the truths we tried to hide. As the day stretched on, safety wrapped itself around us like a fragile promise. Emma explored the gardens under Rosa's watchful eye, her laughter scattering the quiet halls like sunlight. I spent hours with her, teaching her to feed the fish, to trace her fingers along marble railings, to chase butterflies across trimmed lawns. Yet always, at the edges of my vision, I felt his gaze. Not oppressive, not cruel, but present, watching, guarding, measuring. In the evening, Rosa prepared dinner in a smaller dining room, intimate and warm. Emma chattered happily, her voice filling the spaces where mine faltered. I caught Alessio watching her with a quietness I had not expected. His hands, so capable of command, rested lightly on the table, his expression unreadable as Emma told him about her rabbit, about her favorite bedtime song. And when she asked if he had a favorite toy as a child, something in his eyes flickered. Surprise, then memory, then something softer. "A wooden horse," he answered after a pause. "Carved by my grandfather. I kept it by my bed until I was older than I should admit." Emma smiled, satisfied with his answer, and returned to her meal. But I watched him, my heart shifting, seeing in that admission a glimpse of the boy who had become this man. It stirred something inside me I could not silence, something fragile and dangerous, longing. Later, when Emma had been tucked into bed and the house grew quiet, I found myself standing by the balcony again, the night air cool against my skin, stars scattered above, distant and eternal. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. He stepped into the moonlight, his presence steady, carrying the night with him. "You're restless," he said, his voice soft enough that it seemed meant only for me. "Yes," I admitted. "I feel as though I'm standing on a bridge between two worlds. One pulls me back, the other forward, and I don't know which is safer." He came closer, not touching, but near enough that the warmth of him reached me through the cool air. "Safety is never certain, but strength, you already have that. You've shown it every moment since I opened your door." My eyes burned with unshed tears. "Strength doesn't mean I'm not afraid." "No," he said, his voice like velvet over steel. "It means you face the fear anyway." Silence stretched between us, heavy and alive. The moonlight painted his features in silver, his eyes darker, softer. My breath caught, and for one unguarded moment I let myself imagine what it would be like to lean into him, to let his strength hold me, to let the fire he carried burn away the shadows I had lived in. But I did not move. I stood still, trembling, knowing that the choice was not yet made, that tomorrow would come and demand more of me than tonight could hold. I turned toward the door, whispering words of healing into the quiet, words meant as much for myself as for him. We are safe. We are whole. We are not alone. And though I left him standing on the balcony, I carried the warmth of his presence with me, like a flame hidden deep within, waiting for the moment it could no longer be contained. The night carried with it a quiet tension, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that waits, steady and patient, like the stillness before thunder. Emma had fallen asleep quickly, her small hand tucked beneath her cheek, her rabbit pressed close to her chest. I stayed at her side longer than I needed, smoothing her curls, whispering soft, healing words into her dreams. She looked so untouched by the shadows that had nearly claimed us, her innocence intact, and I clung to that sight like a prayer. When the house had settled into silence, I stepped into the sitting room of the suite, the lamp casting a golden glow across polished wood. The curtains stirred gently with the night breeze. My heart was restless, pulled taut between gratitude and fear, between the promise of safety and the unknown weight of what it would cost. I found myself drawn again to the balcony, where the stars spread wide above the gardens, endless and cold yet comforting in their constancy. He was there. I had not heard his approach, but I felt him always before he appeared. Alessio leaned against the railing, his white shirt open at the collar, sleeves rolled as though the night itself had stripped him of armor. When he turned his head, the light of the moon carved his face into something both strong and unbearably human. "You should be resting," he said, though his tone carried no reproach. "So should you," I answered softly, moving closer. "But I don't think either of us rests easily." He let out a low sound, almost a laugh, but weighed with truth. "Not when the world refuses to be still." For a moment we stood side by side, the silence between us not empty but full of unspoken words, of questions neither dared voice. The air smelled of roses and faint smoke from distant chimneys. I wrapped my arms around myself, though it was not the cold that made me shiver. "You've given me safety," I murmured. "You've given her safety. And yet, part of me wonders what comes after, when the danger is gone, when the world expects us to disappear." He turned to face me then, his eyes holding mine with a gravity that made the air between us hum. "After," he said slowly, "is whatever you choose. But know this, what you've built here, even in days, even in hours, it doesn't vanish. Not for me." The honesty in his voice unsettled me more than any threat ever could. My heart stuttered, aching against ribs that had been armor for too long. I looked away, unable to hold the weight of his gaze, yet unable to move from his side. The night deepened, the world shrinking to the rhythm of our breathing. And then he stepped closer, not invading, not demanding, but offering proximity like a question I could answer with silence. I felt the warmth of him before I felt the brush of his hand, light against my arm, a touch so careful it felt like reverence. My breath caught. Years of neglect had dulled me, taught me to expect absence where presence should have been, silence where tenderness should have lived. But here, in the stillness of this night, stood a man who carried both danger and protection, who looked at me as though I were not broken but whole. "I don't know what this is," I whispered, my voice trembling with honesty. "It doesn't need a name," he replied softly. "Not yet. It only needs truth." The truth was there, alive in the space between us. My body leaned, almost against my will, drawn by gravity older than choice. His hand rose, brushing a strand of hair from my face, fingers lingering just long enough to trace the line of my cheek. The gentleness undid me more than force ever could. When his lips touched mine, it was not a claiming. It was a promise, tentative and warm, as though he knew I might break and was determined to hold me together instead. The kiss was brief, a whisper of fire, but it lit something in me that had long been cold. I drew back, breathless, my hand pressed to my chest as if to steady the storm inside. He did not press further. He simply looked at me, his eyes softer than I had ever seen them. "You are safe," he said again, not as a vow of protection, but as a vow of presence. Tears pricked my eyes, but they were not born of fear. They were the release of years of silence, of a longing I had buried so deep I had forgotten its shape. I turned toward the room, needing the anchor of Emma's steady breath to remind me who I was fighting for. As I looked back, Alessio remained where he stood, framed in moonlight, his expression unreadable, yet filled with something that felt like truth. I carried the warmth of that kiss with me as I slipped into the room, pulling the covers tighter around my daughter, whispering words of healing against her hair. "You are safe, my love. You are seen. And perhaps so am I." The night closed around us, heavy with both danger and possibility, but for the first time, the fire I carried within me no longer felt like fear. It felt like the beginning of something I had not dared believe in: love. And as sleep finally came, I knew the next dawn would not erase it. It would only make the choice sharper, the path ahead brighter and more dangerous, waiting for me to step into it. Morning came with a softness that felt unreal, as though the world itself had decided to pause and hold its breath. Pale light spilled across the suite, brushing Emma's cheeks in warmth. She stirred, stretching her arms before climbing into my lap, her curls tangling against my chin. Her laughter bubbled like music, light and healing, and I kissed her forehead, breathing in the simple truth of her presence. She was safe, here and now. That was all that mattered, and yet it was not enough to silence the storm rising within me. Rosa brought breakfast: fruit, warm bread, honey that glistened like captured sunlight. Emma devoured it happily, chatting about the koi, about Rosa's promise of showing her the rose garden. I listened with half my heart, while the other half remained restless, caught between past and future. Today was the day. I knew it in my bones. The question I had run from now waited for me without mercy: to leave or to stay. The mansion was alive with quiet movement. Men in dark suits lingered near the gates, cars hummed in readiness, shadows shifted at the edges of the grounds. I knew it was all for us, for me, for Emma. A wall of protection built by a man whose world I had stepped into by mistake, but could no longer imagine walking away from without tearing something vital from my chest. Later, Rosa appeared in the doorway of the suite, her silver hair tied neatly back. "Mr. Castelli wishes to see you," she said. Her gaze flicked toward Emma. "Alone." I kissed my daughter's cheek, whispering soft, healing words against her skin. "I'll be back soon. You are safe. You are loved." She nodded, too young to understand, but trusting me with all her small, fierce heart. Rosa stayed behind with her, and I followed the familiar path down to the study. The door was open. He stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, his frame tall and steady against the light. When he turned, his eyes found mine instantly, and everything else dissolved. "It's time," he said quietly. I stepped inside, my breath uneven. "Time for what?" "For choice," he replied. He moved closer, each step unhurried, measured but heavy with meaning. "I can give you everything I promised: new names, new lives, distance from this world forever. By tomorrow night, Sophia Ellis and her daughter will disappear. No one will find you again." He paused, his gaze locking with mine, fierce and unyielding. "Or you can stay, here, with me. Not as a guest, not as a prisoner. As someone I will protect, not because of an agreement, but because I want to, because I cannot imagine letting you go." My heart pounded, torn by the truth laid bare. He had said nothing of love, but it was there, in the way his voice softened when he spoke of Emma, in the way his eyes lingered on me, like I was more than a shadow passing through his life. I drew a trembling breath. Leaving means safety. It means peace. but it also means walking away from something I've begun to feel. He came closer, so close I could feel the heat of him, the steady calm he carried even in a world built from storms. And staying means fire, it means danger, but it also means never being alone again. Silence stretched, alive and thick between us. I thought of Emma's laughter in the gardens, her smile when she fed the koi, the light in her eyes when she ran across marble floors without fear. I thought of the man who had stood at my door in the night, who had become the very thing I had feared most, and then, slowly, the very thing I trusted. Tears pricked my eyes. All I've ever wanted was safety for her. A home where she can laugh without shadows waiting at the door. His hand lifted, hovering near my face, hesitant until I leaned into it. His fingers brushed my cheek, reverent and warm. Then let me give her that. Let me give you that. Here. The dam inside me broke. I closed the last inches between us, my lips meeting his. The kiss was nothing like the tentative brush of before. It was fuller, deeper, carrying with it every fear, every longing, every hope I had tried to silence. His arms wrapped around me, strong and certain, anchoring me as though he had been waiting for this moment as much as I had. When we parted, breathless, I leaned my forehead against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I'll stay," I whispered. "For her, for me, for us." His hold tightened, his voice low against my hair. "Then this is your home now. Always." The choice had been made, not out of fear, not out of desperation, but out of strength, out of love, fragile and fierce, born in the ashes of betrayal and grown in the fire of something undeniable. That evening, Emma ran into the gardens again, her laughter ringing against the walls, her small hands clutching at roses as though they belonged to her. I watched her, my heart lighter than it had been in years, and when Alicio's hand found mine steady and warm, I did not flinch. I held on, knowing that this world, dangerous though it was, had become our sanctuary. The wrong number had led me here. To him. To love that burned and healed in equal measure. To a future that was not safe in the way I had once imagined, but safe in the way that truly mattered. Safe because we were no longer alone. And as the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in fire, I whispered the words that had carried me through every night of fear. We are safe. We are whole. We are loved. If this story touched you, if it brought warmth or a spark of healing to your heart, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. A simple like, a kind word, or subscribing to follow more stories helps me continue weaving tales of love, resilience, and hope. Every gesture of support is a light in the dark, and I carry each one with gratitude. This is the end of one story, but the beginning of many more to come. Will you walk with me into the next,